My face currently feels like I've been run through by Tom Stewart.
Puts it to the top of the square. Oh, beautiful little fist in there by Dale. Crucial centimetre moments.
He definitely has a bit of the Belcho spirit. As I have a bit of the Belcho spirit.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Back Pocket Podcast, the only podcast to ever get an official apology from the Sunday Footy Show. My name is Alastair, joined as always by Jack. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I didn't get it. You got it, obviously, not me.
Oh, you didn't get an apology?
No,
You'll get it in writing, not on air.
Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. It's like
Caro doesn't apologise on
like
air,
an old
only in
school
writing.
tax return. That was a baffling, weird news story to run, wasn't it? Anyway.
How dare those players want to spend some time in Sydney with their wives?
How dare they spend, they've got a bit of a break this week. How do they stay a bit longer and have a time away with their family?
Honestly, it's disgusting.
Yeah. Who lets them work less than a 7-day work week?
There are people who are like that.
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, easy. We'll jump into the votes.
I should probably open my notes.
I have an unluckiest mention I'm going to go back to later.
Okay.
But for now, I will go with my one vote, which was to Tom Stewart.
Fair enough.
Didn't have him in at the start, and then as the week went on, I could justify it less and less. 31 disposals, 12 of them were intercepts, 9 contested, 9 marks, 6 intercept marks, 7 rebound 50s and 6 inside 50s, 5 score involvements when Geelong could barely score.
I thought he was pretty good.
The main two things for me were that he had 11 pressure acts and 783 metres gained. He was, especially in the first half, almost a standalone figure for Geelong. So that's worth a vote for me at least.
Yeah, and I kind of went a little similar with my one vote because of how, maybe not stats-wise, but influential they were. Lots of pressure acts. Isaac Quaynor gets my one.
Yep, he was in my special mentions this week. So
Tom
that
Stewart
makes
and
sense.
him, I kind of swapped for us.
Yep.
19 disposals, 3 marks, 11 intercepts. I think I'm making this up. Might be real. I didn't write it down. I think it was 17 pressure acts I read.
Yep, I believe it.
Only 1%er, but it's in the name.
I remember a distinct point during that game when I was walking to the toilet and I just said, shit, he's good. And it just wasn't, I can't remember what it was. I got up to walk away, I was like, shit, he's good.
And I think overall in the league, he's really underrated as a defender.
Yeah, well, you said that the other day when it's very rare that we agree with someone on the TV when they refer to a player as underrated because they refer to highly rated players as underrated. Like I saw Ballard referred to as underrated recently. I was like, only if you're living under a rock in Victoria.
Yeah. I think he was underrated last year.
Yeah, I think so. But
I think he's getting appropriately rated
22
now.
last year. But yeah, so Quaynor is still underrated, but I think it's because that Collingwood team is so good, especially that back line.
He gets overlooked with Howe and Maynard and obviously more.
Dacos is obviously running off that back flank as well. There's a lot going on down there that's taking it away from him, but he's so consistent. I remember he's a name I've always remembered because in his draft year, I was watching the stats and he's the only person still to this date to have a perfect goal kicking score.
Really?
He kicked 6 out of 6 from all the different
We've
angles.
talked about this before, I think.
Which is funny for a rebounding defender who barely crosses the halfway mark. But my 2 this week, and this just these 2 and my unlucky mention really flew around in these 3 spots. But my 2 this week was to Nick Murray. He kept Danaher goalless until the final term when the game was over, and that's with Brisbane having 66 inside 50s to 47. He had 8 spoils, won 6 out of 6 contested defensive one-on-ones, 4 rebounds, 4 intercepts. But yeah, more just spoils, one-on-ones, and keeping Danaher goalless in a Brisbane just keep getting it in there. That's a really, really good effort.
I think I might have a blind spot on that game this week because I didn't write down anyone in that game, so maybe that's bad for me.
It was the only player, even in my special mentions, that I had from that game was Murray, but he was good, really good.
Well, Nick Murray's good. We've talked about him previously. My 2, and this one went from not a vote to 1 vote to 2 votes to just leaving it there. Jacob Wiedering gets my 2.
In my special mentions, was very, very good.
Really good in the loss. Definitely his best game of the year.
I was laughing when they said he needs to lift at 3/4 time.
Yeah, weird that it coincides with the one game this year he hasn't played with Lewis Young, so I wonder if that's maybe freeing up his role into what Lewis Young was doing. He's playing much better.
We did kind of comment that Lewis Young stole a bit of his role at the start of the year.
18 disposals, 10 marks, 9 intercepts, 6 1%ers. He was really good. And obviously, you get a bit of a discount because Buddy's getting old, but he's always played really well on Buddy. And again,
He's one of the few players that I think he averages 2 or less against. So
Yeah.
Well done, Wiedering. My 3 was to the aforementioned Charlie Ballard.
I forgot to remove someone from my special mentions. I've got them in special mentions and a vote.
And votes. He only had 14 touches, but they went at 93%. But of those 14, 11 of them were intercepts and half of them were contested, which is nuts. He had 5 marks, all of which were intercepts, 3 contested marks, 8 spoils, 6 pressure acts. And I think it was cool to see that he can also play a dour miserly performance as well as a big intercept game.
Yeah.
He got 3 coaches' votes as well, which I think
Deserved.
showed how much of an influence he had. But
From the little I saw of that game, and it was not too much, I think he marked it 3 times. So he was
all those
there
intercepts.
when I was watching. I've got him in my special mentions. Didn't get a vote from me this week, but you know what we say about Charlie Ballard, super underrated player. My 3 goes to Connor Iden.
He was
from
my
the Giants.
unluckiest
I knew
mention.
it was. Because I floated him between mentions and votes.
Yeah. He was so good.
Stats don't do him
No,
justice.
absolutely not. I wrote that down. He was huge when the game was on the line, both early and late. Like his first and last quarters were enormous.
He was the only one firing in that back line when they were under siege in that last quarter.
Like Buckley and Keith had good games in that middle patch when it was kind of dead, but Iden was on fire when it was needed.
Yeah. Super important, 11 1%ers, 9 intercepts, the usual.
417
Disposal
metres
efficiency,
gained.
a little bit down. That's probably the lowest disposal efficiency I've given votes for this year. But
But if you're kicking to one-on-ones all the time, which is what that game was a lot of.
It was very contested.
But yeah, he was really good. I don't know what more I can say about a player I felt really bad about not giving a vote. That's why I had to write down an unluckiest mention because I think it's the best game I've not given a vote to. So,
my unluckiest mention was Ballard. I already said he was in my special mentions, but that was like, I felt bad.
My 4 this week was to Nick Blakey.
Same.
The Lizard. I've never seen 2 better, like 4 and 5s in a week.
Yeah,
I feel like
I
they
know
should
what
have
the
taken
5
more
is,
votes.
so we'll talk about it in a minute.
But yeah, Nick Blakey was comfortably best on ground for mine. I thought Warner got run down too many times and sprayed it a few too many times to get the same amount of coaches' votes
I don't
as
think
him.
I've seen a man get called holding the ball that much.
Yeah, and a few times where he wasn't, where he maybe could have been. Blakey had 26 touches, 10 of those were intercepts, 12 marks, 3 contested, 7 of those were intercepts, 9 rebound 50s.
626
I've got
metres
that
gained.
down. And throw in 4 spoils and 3 pressure acts just to put the defensive side of the game on as well. Really good.
Tore him apart. His
he
speed going
was the
from
difference,
D50
completely.
to forward 50.
Especially in that last quarter. Like
I would argue Heaney had an impact, but
he'd already had a good game, but then in the last quarter, when they ran away with it, it was all him. Like
feels really bad giving him 4 votes.
Yeah, I bet. I had to not talk about him all week. But yeah, brilliant. Nick Blakey, what a freak.
Oh, I meant bad as in he's not got 5.
Oh, yeah. No, I get that too. I had him as 5 immediately. I wrote it down. And then as the weekend transpired, and we gave 5 to James Sicily for possibly the best game I've ever seen a defender play. 43 at 91%.
91%, that's the kicker, right?
22 of 43 were intercepts.
The most important part is they won, but 91%, 22 intercepts.
16 marks, 8 of those were intercepts, 6 rebound 50s, 658 metres gained, 11 score involvements, and 6 score launches, which is a nuts number. And then throw in 3 spoils, won all 3 of his one-on-ones, and 5 defensive half pressure acts.
Wild.
You could not play a more complete game as a defender. There was a really funny moment where he had 1 goal kicked on him, and the radio commentary was like, oh, and that's the 2 sides of James Sicily. You know, when he's trying to play loose like that, you can get goals out the back, and it's like, or even at half-time when they called that, I was like, they are dominating because of Sicily. Like, he is... Anyway.
It's like he saw more last week and went, no.
Yeah, I can one-up that.
I can one-up that.
He was like, I'm not going to intercept everything, but I am just going to be the playmaker for the entire ground.
He went, I'll do that, but better.
And the little hole we kind of predicted St Kilda falling into is coming. Teams have just gone, well, if you kick it over the top, what do? And nothing is the answer. You either pick them off through the middle if you've got the foot skills, or in the case of Hawthorn, you've got speed. Just go through them.
Their speed has dropped off too, significantly.
Yeah, St Kilda's for sure. And I think that's
it has been good to see King
part
back,
of
though.
the senior players coming back hasn't helped, and we talked about that balance too.
Crouch,
Freo saw it last year. Getting players back from injury kind of hurt them because they didn't have that flash and excitement they were playing with, and St Kilda's seeing the same. But hopefully they can right the ship, because it'd be a real shame to see St Kilda do the exact same thing this year as last year for Saints fans, who are the definition of long suffering. But it's rough line, isn't it? Modern footy. I think a lot of people talked about it when he got hired. And
and it was really interesting because there were still traits of his brand when you were watching them play and win.
Yeah.
But they looked fun and exciting at the same time.
they were fast was the thing. They weren't never fast before, and now they're not again.
Yeah.
But yeah, Hawthorn, we talked about it earlier, they're the most exciting of that bottom three. And
it's not even close.
Now they might not even finish bottom three. Like, they are a threat
GWS winning helps them.
It does help them, but they're a threat to teams just above them. Especially if they keep up
With Mitchell back and firing.
how contagious they are. Yeah, good on them. So, my special mentions, I got a few this week.
Who didn't I mention?
Mentioned. I've got Liam Jones.
Yep.
Robbie Fox again.
Yep.
I already talked about Jack Buckley. Mason Redmond was fantastic.
He's in my special mentions, and the last one I had was Aaliyah.
Aaliyah was in mine, and Sam Collins is the only one that we haven't mentioned.
You know we love Sam Collins.
And
It sucks we can't vote for him this year because Ballard's been doing
Ballard's
better.
been the dominant. He's kind of handed the role over, and he's just playing a real general role back there, which is, I think, almost more important for the team.
Yeah.
That he's able to not have to focus everything he has on, stopping the team getting inside 50, and he's able to kind of lead.
He's been a little bit more reboundy this year, Collins. So.
He has, yeah.
Reboundy?
Reboundy?
Whatever.
The first thing I wrote down to talk about today was that I never don't find it funny when you see a headline. I saw it today, and it was...
I never don't find it funny.
Yeah, which was Geelong remaining optimistic despite 5-6 record. It's like, what are they going to say? Are you going to interview the club? But like, do you still think they're going to be like, no, we've actually written the season off. We've only lost one more than we've won, but we just don't think we can do it. We're just rebuilding and resetting for next year. And like, the same goes for West Coast when they're like, is the belief still there? What are they going to say? No, like, imagine how panned.
We've packed it in.
Yeah, imagine how panned they would get. They're like, actually, the boys just don't care anymore. We've really just lost.
Can you imagine the interview?
We've really just lost the fire. It's just so dumb. It's like
I have a feeling the interviewer would kind of just stop.
It's like when I saw Dangerfield get asked at half time, do you have trouble watching? They ask every player that. It's like, yeah, of course they want to play. They're professional sports people. Like, they'd rather be playing. Silly stuff.
Nothing will be better than Luke Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think of Big Darcy going down? Oh, I was a bit like, oh no, but yeah. King.
He was king. Like, yeah. He was really good. It was almost the difference.
I can't even get my voice deep enough.
His finding form has seriously coincided with Freo's finding form.
Yep.
And I think it's understandable that a big man takes a while to get cohesion with a new team. Like, that's always going to be the way, but he's looking really good, and so are they.
I think they can really build around those three forwards over time.
Yes. I thought the best game he'd played was against Geelong, and I'm now stepping it up to the game on the weekend.
He's had a few good ones in a row.
He has, yeah. So, and he's got serious talent. We knew that. Sturt, if he could stay fit, is also another promising one on their list. So let's hope they can do it, because I don't mind Freo. And
for now.
yeah, we'll see how we go. But it's good. So that's a lot of arms from me in a row.
Too many arms.
Too many arms. What was your first major note?
I only have one big note, and that's me talking about what's gone wrong with Carlton.
Oh yeah, all right.
I can give you this. You're going to have to sit with me and just let me go through it. So I have...
I'm glad you got the good mic this week.
I have listed out 3 periods for Carlton. Round 1 to 11, 2022. Round 13 to 23, 2022. And the first 11 rounds of this season.
Yeah.
The main issue is midfield goals.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's just that, the midfield aren't kicking goals. So starting out, specifically round 11, 2022 is the loss to Collingwood, where Wiedering did his AC joint and was missing for 6 weeks. So mid-season draft, Sam Durden gets picked up, plays his first game, does his knee. And then McGovern, Williams, Marchbank also all in and out during that period.
Yeah.
Very unsettled defensively. But the team switched from a faster contested style to a much more defensive style. And I feel
to
like...
try and protect the back line.
Potentially, that switch happened too early. Because 2022 Voss spoke a lot about developing the attack, then adding layers.
Yep.
And I wonder if that came too early and has kind of fudged things a little bit.
Yeah.
So backing it up statistically, in the first 11 rounds of 2022, the Carlton midfield kicked 41 goals between them at an average of 3.7 per game.
Yeah.
For the back half of the year, they kicked 19 at an average of 1.7. And for the first 11 rounds of this year, they've kicked 12 collectively for an average of 1.09.
Yeah.
Matching up with the win-loss record of 8-3 for the first period, 4-7 for the second, 4-6 with a draw in the third.
Yep.
So the form since that Collingwood game has been consistent, not great, obviously. Cripps is the biggest example of that. He kicked 15 goals in the first 11 rounds last year.
His votes during that time as well.
5 in the next 11, 1 in the next 11.
Yeah.
I think Zach Fish is the other one whose goals have dropped and he's not even in the team.
Dropped hugely. Probably part of why he's not in the team.
Probably. The other interesting thing is the score accuracy. Obviously, there's a lot going
Number
on
one
with
behind in the comp this year, Carlton.
Mackay and Curnow right now, peppering the goals.
I like that Cameron and Curnow are at the front of the list despite like 7 straight weeks of just
imagine
missing
how
everything.
far ahead they could be. But it went from 55% accuracy during those first 11 rounds, which coincided with Carlton kicking 100 plus 6 times, of which they've only done 3 times since, and one of those is an aberration because it was that West Coast game.
Yeah.
On the other hand, defensively, they were better when they were playing faster. 0 times in the 11 games where they lost 3 times did they have 100 kicks kicked against them. It's happened 4 times since.
Crazy.
Despite the more dour game style. So I don't think it's working, but I don't think it's... I don't want to say it's all game plan because I feel like there's not enough buy-in.
Yeah.
Just if that makes sense. Wiedering actually had to come out.
It's harder to buy into a less exciting game plan, though, isn't it? Like, if last year when you're being told to attack and you're a midfielder, particularly a young midfielder like a Fisher or a Chera or a Walsh, you're going to relish the ability to just go for it, gun for it. That's why Adelaide have been so good this year, right?
100%.
And I think I agree with that. Like when you don't have that game style, it's harder to have the commitment and conviction. Hawthorn, again, a great example. Even when they were getting belted, watching their real young players just try and gun it. They were the number 1 scoring team from centre corridor this year. So I think they still are. So I do get, I get that.
And it's not that an overly defensive game style can't work. We know that obviously it's trending faster these days. But if you look at obviously St Kilda of old, even Geelong during like prelim era, not grand final era, all the players had the buy-in and the defensive system worked. Tweaks needed to be made, but I have a feeling that there's just... It's not far off clicking.
Yeah.
But something needs to change over this buy period, like it did in that first buy period, to switch it a little bit back more in the other direction.
Yeah.
Otherwise, waste of a season.
Yeah, and the talent is there in that group now. Like, it is the right group. I think they were buying into the plan originally, and I think they got heavily destabilised last year. I think it doesn't help having such a loud and passionate supporter base when you get shaken up, because no matter how much you try and ignore media noise, you can't do it completely in Melbourne. Like, if you're a Vic team, Perth as well, Adelaide as well. In big footy cities, you can't avoid that noise when you're struggling.
Big footy cities. It's the old internet.
Yeah. It's like, it was hosted on GeoCities instead of...
But it is interesting, and obviously pressure piles, right? Obviously we talked about the Carolyn Wilson story a little earlier. They'll just find the smallest bit of crap and pile it on to make it even worse. I'm really, really hopeful. We saw it last year with West Coast, like when the COVID 7 happened, and it was like that was Broady's engagement party. Like it wasn't a West Coast problem, and like only 2 of the Richmond players got COVID. So like it was just bad luck. Bad luck.
But you get piled on for bad luck when you're struggling.
I'm hoping it gels them a little. Like everyone's taking the piss now.
You fortify the group.
Yeah. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Hopefully Dow gets a game. That's all that matters.
I hope so. He deserves one.
6 outs and Dow doesn't come in.
2. Before I go to some breaking news, which unlike last week on the couch, it wasn't your boss has been sacked or has quit, sorry. I'll get to that in a minute. I've got one more thing I wrote down, which is that Koch stepped down from Sunrise.
Yeah.
Not interesting. What is interesting is why he stepped down from Sunrise, stating that he's not woke and you can't pretend to be woke if you're not. Spending 3.5 hours a day, every day, trying to be something you're not is hard. And now I want to go into the fact that one of the things I will always give Port credit for is their inclusivity, whether it be the fact that they've killed Doug Nicholls around this year. Yarra Palsy changed the club song, and they did a really good job with the stories on the jumper. And ignoring the fact that most empty-headed rich people like Koshi don't know what woke means, this is also a team that famously has the transport pride behind the flag, behind the goals, and one of the most prominent queer supporter groups in the AFL.
Yeah.
Surely that means he steps down from his woke football club then too, right? Like, because if this is a man who is anti-woke, which is probably just him trying to get a job on Fox, I'm almost guaranteeing that, or a column in The Australian. Not woke basically means I'm racist and transphobic, like modern translation. How do you justify being the head of a football club, especially a football club that is as progressive as Port, and step down from your role on TV using that as your reason?
Oh, man, I was buying into the Koch and McGowan conspiracy theories, but this sounds real.
Yeah, this one is real. I mean, in fairness, there's been ads on Twitter saying Koch's dead for like 2 months. Like widely spread ones since the advertising gone whack. So maybe it's a cover-up. Maybe it's been a fake Koch on TV for a few weeks because he died.
Maybe he is woke.
He's woke.
Woke from the grave.
Yeah. Breaking news, though, is that the investigation into the Hawthorn Football Club...
Oh, is this like as we're talking?
As we're talking, has been terminated. It hasn't been resolved, despite Fagan saying he feels vindicated. It's been terminated. And when I say terminated, I mean that the AFL made a statement saying that they don't rule out making charges in the future, which means that it's ongoing, right? Like, this hasn't helped anything. That means it's still going to be talked about. It wasn't resolved. No one was found not guilty. It's just been terminated. It's just been dropped.
Oh, well, the media are going to run with it's over.
Yes.
So...
and that's what the AFL's decided to do. But, like, you can't just terminate it.
Charges leveled against Hawthorn.
Surely you have to actually finish it, right?
No. Gil wants out.
Yeah,
Gil wants to walk.
Absolutely he does. But I just feel like it's a really piss poor way to manage it, especially from such a prominent taxpayer funded basically organisation. You leave it hanging for no reason. Like that they just terminated it because it was too hard.
I think it was because they realised what damage it would do to the game.
Yeah, well, and also the fact that because they did a independent review that was not independent because they picked the people who chaired it themselves, that the families didn't want to take a part in it, that there was never really going to be an actual resolution because they did it wrong.
I'm just imagining a world where Brisbane, in the form they're in, even though they lost, lose their coach. North Melbourne lose their coach when they're already in dire straits. Hawthorn probably get picks taken off them when they need them. I think the AFL would be in trouble.
I also think the reason they've terminated it rather than said that the findings are that there were no findings is to cover their own ass in case in the future there are findings and the AFL can say, well, we never resolved it. No. We just had to terminate it because of X, Y, Z.
Well, actually.
And Dylan will be like, well, I wasn't in charge at the time. I was just in the room next door getting ready to take over. But yeah, terminated, I guess we talked about it a couple weeks ago. When's it going to end? It has. There we go. But not really. And Clarko still stepped away from the game and Hawthorn's CEO has still resigned. So, what a mess the AFL makes of everything. And it's the same with the Essendon drug scandal, right? Like, it only got as bad as it did with the sanctions
there was a third party
leveled against players and coaches because they didn't resolve it themselves. They tried to sweep it under the rug and they just went,
I don't know if there is a third party that can step in here.
No, there's not.
Fair Work was the one. But
yeah, and then they can't really because it needs to be staple proof, which without an investigation going ahead, which probably won't now because it's too much drama. Hawthorn's not going to bother reopening it now. Why would they bother? Because it's...
Gil's getting the old document shredder ready.
It's already caused them too much trouble anyway. So, what a mess that has made.
Yeah. It's spent half the season dominating the news.
And it was like I said a few weeks ago, innocent or not, Clarkson having to step away from the game because of it is because the AFL made a mess. Whether he, the state Kangaroos have been left in is because the AFL absolutely shockingly mishandled this.
I'd agree with that.
Everyone went through appropriate channels to get it done. Like, the journalist who posted it checked the sources, rechecked the sources before publishing it, tried to contact Fagan and Clarkson. They didn't respond, which they had every right to not respond.
Yeah.
Whoever, I guess, leaked it from Hawthorn could be whoever's the most in trouble.
Well,
but it was an investigation internally done because they were concerned about reports from within the club. They did the right thing. So everyone except for the AFL followed due process with this, and it's turned into a mess. It's a good result for no one.
It's going to be interesting at the end of this. end. Like if a charge ever gets made, Hawthorn are the only one who's going to suffer, and they're the only ones that did the right thing.
For sure. And that's the problem, isn't it? Like it was their president who had to retire because of how much press it put on the club, who called for the review because it was done before he was not the president, CEO, because it was done before he was at the club. Mitchell supported it, and it went ahead, and they got the findings back. They did the right thing to make sure, and lots of clubs do these internal reviews. We saw Collingwood did one, obviously, and they made huge changes on the back of it, and theirs worked out really well for them. They are obviously doing much better at a football club regarding all these kinds of issues now than they were before. But because of the way the AFL mishandled this after that article got posted, it's been a mess. So I hope, and look, Hawthorn are doing all right by the looks of things, but we know that off-field drama can take a bit longer to leach into the playing group. Hawthorn, it sucked. Wrong one. North, it sucked for, obviously, losing their prize coach halfway through the year because of the stress it took on him. And Brisbane are still cruising, thankfully for them. Obviously lost to Adelaide on the weekend in Adelaide, but I think everyone this year has lost to Adelaide in Adelaide, so it's not a huge shock.
They're insane at home right now.
They're very, very good on that ground. We didn't even bring up the fact that GWS have won 3 in a row at GMHBA Stadium. There's only one of those that you can consider like a blip, because that was in that weird week where COVID lockdowns had been announced before and during games. You could maybe argue that one was a weird situation where all the players knew they were about to take 7 weeks off. But the one before that, Geelong were in hot form and GWS, I think, didn't even make the 8. And then this one, they should have won that game by more again. It's the same as the Freo game. I think despite the scores being kicked against them, Geelong's backline is holding up remarkably well. It's their midfield that's getting crushed completely all the time. So I think GWS should have arguably won that game by more again. But 3 in a row, and no other team has won more than 1 in a row there for years, is nuts. That's an incredible record.
I wonder if there's any similarities between Giant Stadium and...
Yeah, you have to wonder, because Geelong don't have a terrible record at Giant Stadium, and some teams do. So who knows, but good on them. That's a pretty big win. Not the biggest win in Kingsley's career, as was stated the other day.
Apparently it is. Bigger than any grand final.
Yeah, even that. But, a huge scalp for him as coach. They've had a couple of close calls and now a good win against some good sides. So hopefully they are building towards something. I like what they've got going on. I think that they're another team experiencing what Collingwood experienced last year, where you have key position players go down and you learn that your backup key position players are really good. Like Jack Buckley's been a revelation.
He's not a backup, he was just third.
Yeah, and Iden stepping into a more important role has been carrying that super well. Whitfield seems to be finding form again with Kelly out, that kind of thing. So good on GWS. I hope they can get some continuation of form, because they really looked like the outlier of the teams that weren't bottom 3. And their last, even 4 or 5 weeks, considering some of the closer margins they've managed to get into games with, their last patch has been really good.
Did some research. As far as width goes, which is the thing with Kardinia Park, obviously it's longer, it's wider. Giant Stadium's only 6 metres off lengthwise.
Yep.
And it is the second closest widthwise outside of Adelaide Oval. So
interesting. Okay, yeah, that would actually, again, considering how well Geelong have played in Adelaide over recent years, that would also make sense.
So potentially part of the reason why
It makes no sense why West Coast plays so well in Adelaide, because Perth Stadium is pretty much MCG sized. I think that was the point when they built it.
Round.
Yeah.
It feels round when you're there.
It does. It really does.
It really feels round.
Yeah, well, that's all the news I've got this week.
I got no news. I don't even have any funnies, man.
Yeah,
it's been a bit of a down week for us.
Yeah, we were pretty bummed about football.
We gave up.
I've perked up a little in the last few days, but it's interesting. I think there's a lot of teams that injuries are affecting their form that we're going to see a big change of after the bye. Like there's a fair few teams, I think, of that middle cluster that are going to get some quality players back into their side that will make a huge difference.
Not Carlton.
Compare that to Adelaide, who've just been cruising all year, which is probably a big indicator of their form. Brisbane as well. Those two teams have just been blessed so far this year with injuries. So, yeah, I credit to teams that can keep their players fit. It always helps.
Shout out to Port's midfield.
Part of why Geelong was so dominant last year was that almost all year they had 20 of their best 23 available. And Port's another great example. When you can keep those players on the park, if you're only missing 1 or 2 of your best players every week, you're going to be in a better spot.
Yeah.
Collingwood, after 2018, was remarkable for them because their injury list was pretty much as long as West Coast is this year. I don't know how they did that, but the last couple of years they've been able to keep players on the park far better than they were before.
Yep.
And it has a massive impact when you're playing.
Continuity means a lot.
Port last year, another good example.
Yep.
So, yeah, I think we're heading into the bye rounds, and I thought I'd be more sure of where the ladder was at this point.
No
but
idea.
I'm not. I still think that middle patch is very close.
I feel like
So many teams lost this weekend that had a real chance to stake their claim. Like if the Bulldogs had beaten Gold Coast, if Melbourne had beaten Freo, they really cemented themselves. Obviously, I mentioned last week, I think Melbourne could lose all of their next 3 because they're just not matching up well against fast teams. And
it's a good thing they're playing Carlton
yeah,
this
well,
week.
but Freo didn't look fast 4 weeks ago either. So if they drop, if they drop just Collingwood, they're not looking great in terms of teams they've beaten versus teams they've lost to.
I think there's still a lot to like about Melbourne.
And we know that they're still the same team minus Jackson that won the flag.
They've got the best points for in the league, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so. Them and Geelong, I think, are the two, because Geelong had their 100-odd point wins in a row.
That's true. The only team I see displacing them from the top 4 at the moment is the Bulldogs, potentially.
Yeah, Melbourne over Geelong by 9 points.
Yeah, there you go. But I think if Melbourne... They'll probably beat Carlton this week, or they should be expected to.
You'd expect them to.
But
how my tipping's going this year.
Did you get one last week too?
No, I ended up getting the last 4 in a row.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if they get that and they can manage to squeak out a win... Squeak? Sneak a win against Collingwood.
Squeak out a win like it's a fart.
Yeah, squeak out a win. Then they're locked. And I would have that top
Melbourne
4
winning
locked.
on Queen's birthday would be sneaking. They have not, even when they were dominating and Collingwood were suffering, Collingwood are winning Queen's birthday games. That's been a real one-sided fixture. King's birthday this year.
It really looks like, looking at the ladder here, St Kilda and Essendon could drop out, Fremantle in.
It is really
Geelong's
funny
run is hard.
mentioning that points for. The outlier in the top 5 points for is so Geelong. It's Melbourne, Geelong, Brisbane, Collingwood, Port. 4, 10, 3, 1, 2.
Yeah.
So strange. But, yeah, it's in for an interesting year. It was the same last year. There was a lot more change last year than in a standard season. I think that
Think about the first half of last year. St Kilda and Carlton was so entrenched in that 8, and then
Geelong
they were gone.
Around mid-table. Geelong went into the bye, I think, 5-5, and then didn't lose another game for the year. I actually saw someone laughing about that. They were like, after their great Matthew Lloyd was like, after their great season last year, Geelong are 5-5, and it's like, and how'd they go last year after being 5-5? Lloyd?
Yeah, but then they lost again.
Yeah,
The dream's dead.
yeah, it ruined it. But I was just like, it was like Matthew Lloyd just did no research, and he was like, premiership team around the middle of the table. It's like, yeah, that happens. But Sydney's the one. I think their win on the weekend was super important, but they still didn't play, I think, a convincing enough game to show anyone that they're back. Buddy's a huge concern because their goals, sans Buddy, seem to struggle.
It all depends.
Their key defensive stocks just keep getting re-injured.
We know how hit and miss Heaney is. When they threw him in the middle, he was
great.
really good.
Yeah.
But will that happen every week? Some weeks he's capable of kicking 5. Sometimes he won't get a touch.
Hapley's in the same kind of boat. His best is electric and will win games, but his worst is non-existent. And they've got a fair few players like that. I think a lot of them are due to being young players. Like when you see a Braden Campbell go from hit and miss, he's, despite being in the same stage of his development as Goulden and Warner, they're freaks.
Yeah.
And you understand it from players like him, but it really is the senior players we need to see more of. Lloyd and Rampy, when Rampy's
Lloyd
playing.
played well.
Lloyd did play well, bit of a turnover merchant, but his intercept game was incredible. He was in the right spot so often to stop Carlton from getting effective inside 50s, which partially is, I would say, Carlton's midfield's fault and their forwards' fault for not leading. But
Don't get tricked, fantasy fans. He's not back.
he's not back. He does it a couple of times a year. It's been the last few years. I was wondering if you're going to lead into that with Carlton's midfield goals. I think a big part of it is that with the forwards not leading, there's not as much
Space.
ground ball that's coming back out to around the 50 mark. Like when a forward leads out and it gets spoiled, it generally comes to a more central 45 to 50 out position. Whereas now they're all dropping right in the mids and it's just locking down.
I've got more Carlton stuff.
I'm
If you
sure
want me
you
to,
do.
I can do
No.
part 2. I didn't even get into the forward and defensive setup.
We'll save it for next week, I think.
Fucking make an audio book.
Thank you for joining us in the back pocket. We will see you next week. I think we'll do a different. We'll figure it out during the week, but we'll do a different vote structure during the buys because it's going to be hard, especially with them not being evenly split this year, to do votes. So we might just do votes at the end of the buy rounds instead of during.
Explain that to me off podcast because I have no idea what you just said.
Yeah, I will. All right. Find us
Explain
at
it like I'm 5.
the Back Pocket AU on all socials. We will see you next week.
Bye.